What if some coincidences are not coincidences at all? What if, before an event even occurs, some part of the mind already senses what is approaching? Allow me to share a somewhat remarkable personal story. About 13 years ago, I had a series of experiences involving the author Anita Moorjani. They left me wondering whether consciousness extends beyond the brain and whether time is quite as linear as we normally assume. It began one weekend in Hong Kong, where I worked at the time. I was walking around the giant IFC mall in the downtown area with my wife when I wandered into the bookshop. Near the entrance, I saw a book sitting on top of a pile, Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani. At that time, I'd never heard of her. I picked up the book and did what I often do when deciding whether to buy something. I became still, brought my attention fully into the present, and tried to feel whether the book was right for me. This is an intuitive decision-making process I've used for decades. My intuition gave me a very clear yes, so I bought it. The book tells the story of Anita's battle with cancer and her extraordinary near-death experience. Her condition had deteriorated to the point where she was admitted to hospital in a coma. Her organs were shutting down and the doctors believed she was about to die. Yet, while unconscious, Anita reported entering an expanded state of awareness with many of the typical features of near-death experiences. She could perceive conversations taking place around her. For example, she became aware of her brother traveling to see her. She experienced her life within a much greater spiritual context, in a state of consciousness that appeared to transcend ordinary time and space. Then, against all expectations, she returned to consciousness and recovered completely within a few weeks. Now, I felt a strong connection with her story. I've never had a near-death experience, but I have experienced many non-ordinary states of consciousness. Some of the insights I received during those experiences closely resembled what Anita described. So I texted my friend Doug Seiden, a transpersonal psychologist in Hong Kong, and told him about the book. He replied that he had met Anita 2 years earlier at the Hong Kong Consciousness Festival. Apparently, she was a very nice woman. Anita, it seemed, also lived in Hong Kong. I have to admit that I felt rather envious of Doug. Over the following days, a peculiar scene repeatedly appeared in my mind. I imagined myself sitting in a public place and suddenly realizing that Anita Moorjani was beside me. In the scene, I walked over, held up her book and asked, "Are you Anita Moorjani?" I wasn't deliberately visualizing this. I wasn't trying to manifest anything. The scene simply kept returning to me. The next day, while traveling on public transport, I could almost feel that Anita was physically close to me. I looked around the train, but she wasn't there. The afternoon of the following day, I went to a coffee shop near my apartment in Discovery Bay on Lantau Island, where the Hong Kong airport is. I sat down, opened my computer and began writing. Then a woman's voice caught my attention. At the next table directly in front of me, there were 3 people who looked to be of Indian heritage. One woman had her back partly turned towards me and was talking about her publicist. I immediately wondered whether she was Anita Moorjani. But I thought, no way, it couldn't possibly be her. As I looked at her from behind, I could see a distinguishing feature on her right cheek. Fortunately, I had her book Dying to Be with me in my computer bag. I quietly opened it to the author photograph. Sure enough, the feature was in exactly the same place as on this Indian woman. But I felt too embarrassed to interrupt their conversation and return to writing on my computer. Then the next thing I knew, the Indian man who was sitting at the table suddenly stood up, walked over to my table and asked, "Is that book any good?" "Yes," I replied, and then I just said it. "Is that Anita with you?" He affirmed that it was indeed Anita Moorjani. The man was Anita's husband, Danny, and they invited me to join them. We talked for about 20 minutes and I found Anita to be as warm and genuine as her book suggested. Anita and Danny commented that the kind of coincidence I had just experienced were so common in their experience, they no longer considered them remarkable. But the strange connections didn't end there. I learned that Anita and Danny also lived in Discovery Bay, where I lived. Even more remarkably, we discovered that several years earlier, we had all lived at the same time in the same tiny village in Hong Kong's New Territories. The village contained only a few hundred people, and we had lived at opposite ends of it. They even knew several of my friends. Yet we never met there, as far as I could recall. After our chat, we shared contact details and said goodbye. The following evening, still excited by the event, I wrote a post about our meeting on my old blog. At around 5 o'clock the next morning, while sleeping, I had a short but vivid dream. In this dream, I saw my friend Doug standing in front of a giant earth, or image of the earth, and he was looking down as if from a spacecraft. And you can see this is actually similar to what is on the homepage of my old blog. Now, beside him in this dream, though, I saw a vertical bar of white light beside him, and it suddenly began shooting upwards. I intuitively understood that the bar represented traffic coming to my blog. In the dream, Doug looked at the bar of energy and said to me, "This is because of something you wrote." I awoke immediately. Later that day, I checked my blog post about my meeting with Anita. Now, a normal post at that time would receive 10 or 20 views during its first 24 hours. This one had already received about 400, and it eventually attracted more than 2,000 views. I later found out that Anita had shared the link on social media. Yet the interesting thing is that she had shared it about 6 hours after my dream. I know because I contacted her to tell her about this. So my dream had somehow anticipated the increased attention my blog post was going to receive a few hours later. This experience touches upon what I call integrated intelligence, the capacity to combine rational thought with deeper intuitive ways of knowing. It rests upon the possibility that mind is not completely confined to the brain. It may be able to access information across distances and perhaps even across time. That brings us to synchronicity. Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung described synchronicity as an acausal connecting principle. This is where an inner experience and an external event become linked through meaning, even though no conventional chain of cause and effect connects them. In my case, the recurring mental image of meeting Anita was followed by an almost exact physical encounter. Then my dream appeared to anticipate the sudden attention my blog would receive. Some people suggested that I had willed the meeting into existence through the law of attraction. Now, I don't believe that is what happened, for I made no deliberate attempt to create it. My interpretation is that I was sensing an important event that was already approaching in time. In some strange way, the future meeting was casting a shadow backwards through time. Of course, one story cannot prove that consciousness is non-local. Coincidences do occur, memories are imperfect, and human beings are excellent at discovering patterns. We should retain our critical judgment. But nor should we let skepticism become a reflex that prevents us from examining experiences that challenge our assumptions. If mind can access information beyond the present moment and the individual brain, the implications are profound. It may transform how we understand intuition, creativity, dreams, and human consciousness itself. I explore these possibilities much more deeply in my forthcoming book, The Other Singularity, which I expect to be published in 6 months or more. The book examines integrated intelligence, the non-local mind, and what these ideas might mean for humanity's future. Now, if you found this story intriguing, please like the video and subscribe to The Other Singularity. And the next time an extraordinary coincidence occurs in your life, pause before dismissing it. Perhaps it is chance, or perhaps the mind knows more than you think. Now, Have you already experienced something like this? If so, please do share your story in the comments section. I would love to hear them. I'm Marcus T. Anthony. See you again soon in the futures.